Welcome to the How to DAO podcast, your go to source for everything about decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. We are not just here to inform, we are here to inspire and empower a new wave of creators and participants in the DAO space. We offer a comprehensive suite of courses tailored for everyone, from those taking their first steps in the DAO world to seasoned veterans looking for deeper insights. These courses cover everything from the fundamental blockchain and DAO concepts to advanced strategies in governance and tokenomics, ensuring you have all the knowledge and tools necessary to thrive. But we go beyond education. Upon course completion, you will have access to funding grants to launch your own DAO or secure a position within an existing one. We are committed to supporting you at every stage of your journey. On this podcast, you will hear from some of the brightest minds in the DAO community. Our guests share their personal stories, practical advice, and visionary insights, helping you navigate complex yet exciting landscape. And don't miss our newly released book, How to DAO, available at major US retailers or directly from our site at howtodao.xyz. And join our thriving community on Discord, where all these initiatives converge. You can find the invite link on our Twitter at howtodao.book. We believe passionately that DAOs are the future of coordination. Our entire initiative is designed to support this movement and help you be part of it. And now we will hear from our guests, so stay on. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's live stream podcast where we have a very special guest whose journey mirrors my own in some fascinating ways. Joining us is Denison Bertram, a visionary in the blockchain space. Like me, Dennison spent part of his life in the Czech Republic in Prague, where he kickstarted one of the earliest Bitcoin initiatives. After that, he made the move to New York, much like myself, and there he dove deep into the world of DAOs. Dennison is the co-founder and CEO of Tally, a pioneering platform that has become the go-to for governance in many of the largest protocols, such as Arbitrum, zkSync, Uniswap, and many more. Today, we are going to explore his journey from Prague to New York, from Bitcoin to DAOs. So welcome, Dennison.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. So let's start with the Bitcoin Prague part. Like how you got actually into Bitcoin so early. Like, what was the aha moment for you there? And what was the year? Was it like 2014 or something?
No, it was like 2011. I think I first heard of Bitcoin in 2010 and didn't think of anything about it. And then I heard about it again in 2011. I think that's like when Bitcoin first broke $1 or something like that. And it like broke $1 and then it like collapsed and everyone said Bitcoin's dead. I think it was like I got in the first time Bitcoin was declared dead. Or around that time. So I read the Bitcoin white paper and it really immediately clicked for me. At the time, I was actually an artist, but I had a degree in political science and I'd always been very tech focused prior to that. And so just reading it I don't know, and somehow it just made total sense to me. I saw how 2000 had sort of destroyed the careers and basically the trajectory of like so many people that I knew had been on. Something that we don't appreciate is that when we have these like kind of tragedies that happen, whether it's like COVID or economic collapse like 2008, we kind of think about people getting over it, but the reality is actually people don't get over it. Like we just sort of lose that generation, and that generation went on to sort of pioneer the hipster movement in many ways, right? Like they left their jobs at Lehman Brothers and they went on to build businesses of craft beer and other things like that because there wasn't a way to get back into the industry, right? Like by the time things came back around, there's a new crop of fresh Harvard graduates. You'd been unemployed for a few years. So every time we have these kind of tragedies, we lose a whole generation, which I think is important to keep in mind when we think about all the students who didn't go to school through COVID and all that sort of stuff. But society tends to work that way. We don't ever actually rescue the folks that we hurt or who get hurt. We just sort of like move on to the next generation. So when I read the Bitcoin white paper, it really clicked to me. And one of the things that stuck out, because at the time I was an artist, but I was working in the fashion industry. During the financial collapse, 2008, something really interesting happened, which is the rich got extraordinarily richer, right? And you saw this because fashion accessories, bags, like they tripled in price. So it was something crazy that luxury items just like skyrocketed in price. And I remember at the time, I was working with one fashion brand, and they effectively canceled their sort of like mid-tier brand. They told me, they were like, it's so much less expensive and higher profit to make one dress for someone who's rich than make thousands of dresses for regular people. So we're just not even going to focus on that. And so I kind of came into it feeling like, what is going on with monetary policy? What is going on with the economy? What is going on that all this is happening? And it's so deeply distorted. And that I was like primed to read the Bitcoin white paper, right? Like I'd already been like starting to think about this. And when I first read it, it actually struck me in a way that is very relevant now. But for many, many years, when I talked about it, just didn't land, which was when I first read it, it seemed clear to me that, not only does this address a lot of our financial monetary policy issues. When I was in Prague, I was actually studying economics. That was my minor. But it opened up something that I saw as like the economy for the machines. I had this vision of like, in the future, everything will have a Bitcoin wallet, and your phone will pay your outlet in the wall for electricity, and your outlet in the wall will pay your house, and your house will pay, the electricity provider. And, I kind of saw this world also. If you remember back then, there was ideas around distributed storage, right? Like cloud storage was kind of like a new thing. And people even then were experimenting with this idea of like, well, my phone is full and your phone is nearly empty. So why can't your phone just rent the RAM or the storage space on your phone, right? And we could use digital currency, because the thing that really stuck out, I've used this example for always, is that money is the only human concept that is not natively transferable over the internet, or historically was not natively transferable over the internet, right? All other concepts you can transmit through technology, right? I could send you an email and say, hey, I love you. And you could feel loved, right? You would feel love. And that's pretty interesting, right? Like people don't appreciate how powerful that is. A human concept that exists only as a concept in my head, I can actually transmit using real technology, something very like tangible. Right? I can send that over electricity. Can send the idea of love over electrons around the world. That's actually an incredible thing. But you can't do that with money, or you couldn't do that with money, right? Like I could write you an email and say, I love you, and you could feel loved, but I could also write you an email and say, here's $1, and you don't have anything, right? Didn't work. So I really saw that as like, oh, wow, actually this kind of closes the loop where now we can transmit money natively between machines and there aren't intermediaries. And I felt like that was very important, because a lot of, economic growth and dynamism about the economy comes from the fact that there's kind of this invisible hand of the market, which is really at scale, all these millions or even billions of participants interacting together, and there's some evolutionary pressure that forces the market to evolve and develop things. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation about like what sort of really got me in the beginning, but I saw it, I was totally in love. I went to try and build one of the first Bitcoin exchanges in the Czech Republic at the time, 2011, 2012, and it was incredibly difficult. It was wildly difficult, right? I was this like half black guy in like Central Eastern Europe, going to like VCs, asking them for money to build a monopoly exchange on the internet, right? For like, I mean, fundraising in Europe is notoriously difficult anyway, right? Like that's like just an incredibly hard thing to do, but it's even harder, how many years ago? It was like 12 years, 13 years ago, right? I mean, like we all know that Europe is not actually doing well with innovation on any metric or on any front, but then it was just like kind of impossible. And at the time, This is right around kind of the time that the European central bank sort of issued like their first sort of opinion on digital currencies. And it wasn't a nice opinion. And, I was banking with a bank in Prague. And basically the sort of feedback from like the Ministry of Finance and the bank was what I was doing, this Bitcoin exchange, was not illegal. But they might try and figure out a way to make it illegal, and they would punish me in retrospect for it, right? Like they would like go backwards. I remember there being this letter where what they had said, I spoke Czech, but at that time it was like not super awesome at it, but it loosely kind of translated to, "We will make an example out of you." So it was just like, okay, I'm getting like that. But actually, the largest problem was fraud. There was just a lot of fraud at the time. Even then, actually, the Czech Republic had a really good, well developed banking system. So you had near instant bank transactions, especially when you were within the same bank. And within different banks, it was still very fast. And while what we were selling was technically legally a commodity at the time, you had this problem where people would basically like log into their grandmother's online banking and then like send money to buy Bitcoin. And then the grandma would like make a complaint to the bank saying like, I didn't make this transaction. Right. So these transactions that were supposed to be final and irreversible, the bank would come to us and say, give the money back. We don't care. We think you're a scammer. We think what you're doing is a scam. Give the money back. So we had a really hard problem with fraud, and it was very difficult to deal or address with that. But in retrospect, if I knew what I knew now, if I had the experience in startups and businesses that I had now, I would have like persevered more. The growth in like the first 3 months was incredible. It was like 5-digit percentages, right? It was just like incredible. But at the time it felt scary. You couldn't get any support. No one would give you money. You're doing it on your own. I was bankrolling it myself. I like to make the joke that I would be rich today if I hadn't tried to build all this shit and pay for it with Bitcoin, right? Lessons learned, obviously. But, it was just like kind of became too big of a challenge. So yeah, that was my first foray in. Prague was like a pretty hip spot actually for Bitcoin in the early days, right? Most people don't know this, but mining, like pooled mining, which is when you have lots of machines working on solving a block together, was invented in Prague, right? This guy named Slush, that was his like name on Bitcoin Talk. He lived in Prague. I don't know where he lives now. Maybe he's on like a moon base. He was an early Bitcoiner. Who knows? Maybe he's just got like a floating ship in the sky and he like lives there. But he invented mining, so like people were really into Bitcoin in the early days, about the technology. One of the first hardware wallets, Trezor, came out of Prague. I tried to do a hardware wallet as well with like a different mindset than Trezor. But yeah, it was a very, 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 very different time for crypto. And to see it have grown and changed so much, I both kicked myself that I just didn't work at McDonald's and just buy Bitcoin the whole time. Just do nothing else. But it's exciting to have been right. So many of us were right on something that just seemed like such a crazy, crazy thing to get involved in. And look at where we are today.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is
The
thriving.
future.
It's over 100,000. So now we are getting way more people excited about the
Yeah.
technology. But I think like no, what you are saying, it's great. Like we always need this early pioneers in any technology, to prove the concept, to try to push it forward. And I don't know why, but like Prague seems like actually been like one of the kind of core spots for Bitcoin. I think the mining you mentioned, like we were like third largest for a long time, like after US and China, which is like crazy if you compare the sizes. Like Czech Republic, it's like a city in US or a town or village in China. So like, and we still been like, kind of third in the world for Bitcoin mining, and there's still a large Bitcoin community. So maybe just little plug there, like if you want to visit Prague, there is a great time this year because Eat Global, the largest hackathon, is coming to Prague end of May, beginning of June. So definitely, if you want to plan your trip, this is the right time to be there. I believe Dennison, you will be there as well.
Yeah, I'll be there. I come for every ETH Prague. It's great.
Yes. Yeah,
Any
same here.
reason to come to Prague, I take.
Same here. So we will be there as well. So you started with the Bitcoin and like you had this trouble with like banking, like that the final transactions are not actually final. And like I think that's why we are in the crypto space anyway. Like we want to make the financial system just better and like more sovereign and like that you can rely on it, that there is not like a gatekeeper who can say, well, they send you the money, but we decided like we will take it back actually, you know. it's it's not something like if you are a business owner like you can rely on, like you ship the product and then like the money it's going out of your bank account anyway. So just like maybe to move a little forward now, so like you started with the Bitcoin, but then something happened probably and you moved from Prague to New York and also moved from Bitcoin to DAOs. So
Yeah.
why you actually what got you excited into DAOs? Like I know a lot of Bitcoiners actually like don't like, or at the beginning they did not really appreciate Ethereum and like the like complexity of it, but you are the early Bitcoiner but you actually went into it. So what was the decision point for you?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. There's a few things. One is actually culturally. Bitcoin did go through a period where it went from being a lot of pretty utopian, idealistic individuals to becoming not that. I think people talk about Bitcoin maxis, and if you follow along the sort of like history of like the forks in Bitcoin and other projects and the hostility towards things that weren't Bitcoin, it became a bit of a toxic community for a long time. Maybe some people will argue that it's still a toxic community, although I think today all these communities are so big, it's a little bit difficult to actually characterize them anymore, right? But like once upon a time, the Bitcoin community was actually just a couple hundred people, right? It was not very large, and there was deep tribalism. As it grew, it went through those like growing pains of like bringing in newcomers. There were some like early folks like Roger Ver, who was Bitcoin Jesus at the time, who had really outsized personalities and, things that started off like kind of a utopian vision. Some people realized really were probably the future of money, and that what was at stake was, maybe control over the future monetary system. And they kind of took it that way. And I didn't like that. That was not the reason why I joined the community, and not what I enjoyed about it. And the causticness just kind of got too much for me at one point. It wasn't interesting anymore. Also, development in the Bitcoin ecosystem kind of stalled for a long time, right? There was like initial innovation of like the first altcoins, and then there was like attempts to do programmability on top of Bitcoin with things like Colorcoin and Mastercoin. But these all face like terrible amount of hostility, and the ecosystem kind of froze. Like there was a lot of things that people sort of talked about as like scaling Bitcoin. Like even today, people don't want to really touch Bitcoin so that like it doesn't change, and that's like its property that it doesn't change. But it's always been like that at every level, even when Bitcoin was far, far less mature than what it is today, and it was just not as good, arguably in some ways. It would have never scaled to this size without like various changes that have been made over the years. So that argument has always gone on, but it just became a thing like, okay, this is about money and sending money, but it wasn't very good for that, to be honest, right? Like you had to wait, 6 confirmations, and 6 confirmations took a long time. Like things like Lightning were in early stages at one point, but they were difficult to use, and even to this day, don't really. I'm sure people will freak out if I say work, but definitely were not successful in the way that I think people hoped it would have been at the time, right? Like it did not significantly alter the trajectory and success of Bitcoin, right? So the community kind of was just lost me as like in being interested. And Vitalik came along, and in the beginning I was not sold on Ethereum, but his vision of the world computer and the openness and the fact that like they would show up on stage and do silly goofy dances and like pajamas made it very approachable, right? And I think what they did is they won by being exceptionally approachable. right? Yes, the technology is very, very good. And, it turns out people did want smart contracts, contrary to what like a lot of Bitcoin people thought. People did want programmable money. And it was just a really welcoming community. And it was very Web3 idealist, right? Like people, the projects then were identity and social reputation and, using things like TCRs and NFTs and all these kind of like cool, fun ideas that were not yet exclusively about finance. And they onboarded an enormous number of people who made the space welcoming and interesting and actually primed the ground for it to be a spot where DeFi would take hold, right? Like it was a place where you could come and come up with an idea and people thought it was cool. In Bitcoin land, if you came up with a new idea, like you generally had to just deal with just like a torrent of like hate if it somehow did anything different, right? Like you sort of look at the experience of like ordinals and the success of the ordinals has had, but like just the amount of hate that someone got for like making it really useful for a entirely new audience, right? So that's what attracted me. I have to give a big shout out to like the early ETH Denver crew. Going to at the time there was ETH Denver was held out of this old closed down car dealership in Denver, and they called it the sports castle because it like was decorated like it was a castle. It was just like a rundown parking garage kind of thing, but it was just great. Like just the vibes were totally there. Everyone would hang out. It was just a really awesome experience. And I managed to join Open Zeppelin very early on, so I was one of the early team in Open Zeppelin and just really got into the ETH community and ethos in a very big way. And DAOs always attracted me because of the sort of like idealism around creating new structures for organizing humans and capital together. And I found that very exciting. So that's what, sort of would eventually lead me towards, working to build Tally and meeting my co-founder and really having a lot of these visions around how we can change the world from, starting from corporations.
Nice. Yeah, like I remember the Denver, the beginnings of it. Like we actually rented out Sports Castle last year as well. It's a terrible venue to be honest, but it has good vibes. And it was always like, packed with people. You meet like people there because there is just one way go out, go down. So it was good to interact. I like it very more than the new one because it's just like it's a big fair. But they scaled up. I understand they need bigger place
Yeah.
to live right now. But I like what you are saying with the Ethereum community, like being approachable. I think I can sense that as well. Like people here in the community, in the Ethereum community, are like whenever you ask someone for help, like they would direct you towards the right direction, or they will give you like the advice or jump on the call with you, if they have time. Like I don't think they are like trying to like, not help other people. Like they still feel like we are early and we need to grow the ecosystem at large. Like it's not about the individuals, it's about the group basically.
Yeah.
And I like that and I appreciate it. And I think one of the that's why we started How to DAO. I believe one of the coordination mechanisms and like what can grow the ecosystem are DAOs, because like that's the groups which are coordinated with each other and building the pieces of the ecosystem, and like that helps make the success for the Ethereum.
Yeah.
What's your kind of like view on DAOs? Maybe like let's start with like the first question, which is very tricky. What is a DAO? And then let's get into it, like why you started Tally, or what you've seen, like, the need in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So I think today more than ever, it's very difficult to say what a DAO is. It's always been difficult to say, but I think today more than ever, as so many of these concepts and ideas that we've pioneered really have come into their own and mainstream, we've lost control over ownership of their meaning and how they're interpreted. So, I think historically it meant decentralized autonomous organization, some sort of like thing that could operate on its own and execute decisions and have like lots of people around the world operating it. In practice, these things ended up looking very different. There's very few DAOs out there that truly meet the probably original intention or original definition of it. which, you know, is fine, right? Like, you know, we didn't get hoverboards either, right? Like, so, you know, like there's a lot of things that drive forward our, like, you know, technology that don't necessarily pan out completely. I think today, you know, like what a lot of people have taken DAOs to mean is for the last few years as sort of like a regulatory hedge on how to operate what might otherwise be considered, you know, somehow like illegal software, right? Like, which is quite sad. I think that speaks a lot to like the sort of relationship that the ecosystem had with the previous administration. And but for me, it still stands out as it should be something valuable, something collective that is owned and operated by the people who either use it, care about it, or have a stake in it. Right. And actually, there's a lot of DAOs. When you look around your life, there's actually a lot of DAOs out there. You know, I think a great example is like co-ops, right? When you live in a co-op and you buy your apartment, but your apartment is actually just represented as a percentage of this corporate entity that owns the actual building collectively, and then you have these like, you know, rights that are set out on this like agreement, this corporate agreement as to like what, you know, having being an owner there actually like means and entitles you to and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting that like in many ways we built this new world that actually just maybe better mirrors the existing world that's already out there and how people actually already live and do things. But yeah, like early on, I think we would have had very cypherpunk ideals of what DAOs were. And the truth is that like coordination turned out to be very, very difficult at scale. And part of that is because we still need better tooling. And, you know, at Tally, we focus on building better tooling. But it's probably something a little bit more than that, to be honest. It's probably something a little bit more than that. Like, I think operating these organizations at scale is just really very difficult. And you need great tooling, but you also really need great alignment and you need great financial incentives. I think when we started DAOs, we were sort of hoping that a lot of the world would just volunteer to do good. And turns out that most people in life are just too busy trying to make enough money to pay rent. And landlords just don't accept vibes and NFTs for payment. So, you know, like I think many of these sort of like regenerative, green and, you know, cypherpunk ideas have struggled to find like long-term tractable platforms because it's such a big challenge on the technology, it's on the challenge on the tooling, and it's on the challenge socially. You know, this is a little bit outside of like what we were kind of asking, but we kind of live in a very different moment now. Kind of, you know, if you think about like, you know, the rise of Donald Trump, the rise of sort of like authoritarianism just in general, even the idea of like founder mode, which is so popular now, these are all very, very strong centralizing concepts, centralizing ideas. And so we kind of live in an era of centralization, right? Despite the fact that, you know, we've been trying to build towards decentralization, even the new blockchains that are coming out, they really tout the virtues of centralization, right? Like greater speed, greater throughput, greater economic opportunity. And, you know, that I think has really intersected in a weird way with sort of like the Web3 ethos. I think privacy is a great example of that too. I give this example quite often, but like when we started Web3, most people didn't have cell phones, and they certainly didn't have smartphones. They certainly didn't have cameras in their phones. The phones certainly didn't have GPS, right? People did not have video cameras in their bedrooms pointed at the bed. They didn't have video cameras in their doors pointed at the street. They didn't have video cameras on the inside pointed at them, right? And back then we cared about privacy. Privacy was a big thing, right? Like people felt private. Their lives were private, and you wanted to take a picture of someone. You certainly went up to someone's door and there was a video camera in your face. It was weird. It was a weird thing, right? Like that was a strange world. You valued privacy. But fast forward today, and actually, you know, if we talk about Web3, there are a large number of founders in the ecosystem today who build protocols and build technology who never had privacy, right? We come from an era where we were building Web3 to guarantee privacy as a right. But today, who cares about privacy as a right, right? This society has changed so much, right? Google can watch you in your bedroom at any time. I know people who have security cameras in their bedrooms and pointed at their bed. You would have never said, Google, some engineer at Google, you can just drop it and watch me in my bed, watch me changing, watch me getting naked. You have never said that was okay. But the world has changed. And in fact, we don't value privacy anymore. And it's kind of marooned. If you look at like the original privacy projects, of course, there's been a little bit of update on that with like Tornado Cash. But if you looked at like the original privacy projects and the whole, a lot of like, you know, Web3 really was about, I would say at one point in time, maybe like 30% of the dialogue in Ethereum was around privacy. That's all gone. Nobody cares about privacy. And, you know, to the point I mentioned earlier, many of the people building in the space today actually have never had privacy. They don't know what privacy actually ever is, even was. It's like it's an abstract academic concept. They were always tracked by the government. Their entire life, they were tracked by their government, right? Their entire life, they were showing themselves on cameras, needing to present themselves on cameras, being required to give ID for cameras, right? Before September 11th, I remember September 11th, before September 11th, you could travel around the United States without identification, right? You could get on a plane with very limited forms of identification, right? There wasn't even in some cases security checkpoints. You would just like show your ticket and you'd go on, and they'd look at you, and you know, maybe they would like x-ray your little bag, and like you just go, right? So to be building in an era where we're almost like, there's this phrase that I used the other day in Twitter and I really like it. I'm going to just start using it a lot now, which is at the end of the Cypherpunk manifesto, they talk about how cypherpunks have root access to the future, right? It was this idea that because of how they're operating, they had this access to the future. And I like to say the cypherpunk movement had root access to the future, but that future was already many years ago, you know? And it's today when we say, oh, every human deserves privacy, what does that even look like, right? You know, maybe you're already making money selling feet pics on OnlyFans, or maybe you post everything you eat or everything you wear on the internet, right? Like Meta is able to profile how humans grow and change just from looking at 20 years of your selfies, right? Like they can actually be like, oh, this is how this like person's physiological features change, right? Like incredible amount of data has been harvested, so much so that now LLMs and AI, you know, they know everything about us, right? The TikTok, you know, one of the great reasons that they wanted to ban it is because they know everything about us, right? The government cares because they say it's a national security threat. Did anybody else care? No, they didn't care at all. Oh, China knows what I'm doing all the time. Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah,
Fine, let them.
it's kind of scary, you know, when you like really think about it. But like, you know, just so like we have this podcast, you know, it's live streamed. Like we started the How to DAO initiative, which like we want to spread the movement. Like basically it forced me to not be private, like force me to like share as much as I can to get the attention so the movement can grow, you know. So there are, so like as you were saying earlier, like about the incentives, you know, like there are like inherent incentives to actually be public. Like privacy won't bring you value basically in that sense, or it's not that great value, but you know there is always this risk and reward kind of balance. And I feel there is big risk on the like we have no privacy, or let me rephrase it, some centralized authority has all the data, means like Google has the data, government has the data. If something goes wrong there, like they can leverage those data against us very easy, you know. And like I don't know if it's a good example, but I used it recently, like you know, before Second World War, Poland had great registry of their people and their religious beliefs and everything. And it was amazing for the internal administration, you know, they were like in the future of administration in the way. But when those data got into hands of, you know, bad people, it went very, very wrong, as we
Sure,
all know.
sure.
And this can also happen with the data we have right now. So the question is, and I might have some thoughts on that, but like would like to hear your thoughts. Like we can complain about it, but what we can actually do about it.
You know, sort of circling back to my first point of how society doesn't actually save anyone, it just moves on, right? And you're on your own, figure it out. I fall sometimes into a little bit of a trap of cynicism where maybe our goal is to do is sort of like create some sort of like time capsule for the idea so that when the time is right, someone new will pick up the torch. Today, being a champion of privacy is exceptionally hard. And it's doable, but you have to have really vast financial resources, right? Because to make it work, you actually need lots of people using privacy infrastructure. Privacy infrastructure actually doesn't work very well when it's just you. And the way the society is constructed is that you don't have to participate in it. To your point about being public, right? You don't have to be public, but if you don't, you do not exist, right? And, I'm a little bit older than a lot of folks in the industry, so I've seen this happen before. And I remember the best example is credit cards. At one point, you couldn't sign up for new things without a credit card, right? I don't want a credit card. I don't need a credit card. Well, that's fine, but you can't shop here. You can't rent videos from Blockbuster Video. You have to have a credit card. Then at some point, it became a cell phone number, right? It's like when you look around, we get 2FA, so many things you log in today with your cell phone number. You don't have to have a phone number. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can't use all these things, right? You don't exist anymore. Right. So, sometimes I think, and again, not to be like too cynical, but it's worth contextualizing if now is when the fight is most effective, or is this our time when we have to I love this discussion around like the second foundation in Ethereum, right? Like without like getting into like what that means and like the challenges that the Ethereum community are facing right now, there's this idea of also planning for the future. Right. One of the things I used to say years ago is that there's no, with if you know Simona Pop and Shannon Negwig from like the early like ETH Denver crew, we would talk about like there's no plan for what happens when we win. When Web3 wins, there's no plan for it, right? And because of that, we won, and it's really been overtaken by the financial element, right? Because there was no plan for winning. It was just like, I think a lot of people who are on the outside and are kind of revolutionaries fall into the trap of the permanent revolution, of the permanent fight, right? And there isn't a plan for winning because almost your identity is from being on the outside and fighting this fight that's so challenging, right? But what happens when you win? And that's generally, I think, when people falter, right? And in our case, I think Web3 woke up one day when we won, right? We clearly won, right? The president of the United States of America wants to maybe put a digital assets, vault, whatever his crazy ideas are for it, right? We've won. What was the plan for that, right? Instead, Trump is now the face of the future of crypto, right? His meme coin is the face of the future of like, I don't know what that's going to be used for, but I'm imagining somehow like political influence, right? Without having not had a plan to win means all our work, our decade of work is defined by people who didn't understand why we did this in the first place. It's defined by people who are interested in making money, not for elevating the world or making it a better place, right? And that's kind of like always the failure of kind of revolutionaries or outsiders, that they define themselves by the struggle so much that they can't envision or plan for a world where the struggle is over. And now we're in a place where for a lot of people the struggle is no longer relevant. The struggle is not something that matters to a lot of people anymore. Like, again, the privacy, it just doesn't matter to a lot of people. Something will have to happen, right? Like maybe, the administration uses your Bank of America accounts to kick you out of the country or something like that. Something's going to happen to like remind us why these things are important, because it's not good enough for these things to be important just because they're nice things and they're right things and they're just things, right? If it was, we would have saved the planet. We've known since the 1980s that the world was getting hotter, right? And back then it wasn't political and people just said, yeah, global warming is happening. Everyone believed it. It wasn't like a question. Scientists figured it out. We saw the data. We were like, we're all totally on board. Today, people stand in the face of like hellfires and like 6 inches of snow in southern Florida and, hurricane after hurricane. And they think it's some sort of, space laser, right? So
Well,
is it the time now? So that sort of brings me back to like, maybe it's the time to like build a vault, right? Like a second foundation, but for like the idea of Web3 even, right? Like, I think we talk about it with the Ethereum Foundation because, people may be disappointed or not disappointed with their stewardship, but maybe now is the time that we actually build a second foundation for Web3, for the ideals that we had, right? With the idea that maybe now is actually not the time, right? We are definitely in this regressive wave. Everything is pointing towards authoritarianism. That will not last forever, right? No, these things never do, right? So it's the like, we were sort of like off the bull run of like liberal democracy. We're sort of like in the winter of liberal democracy, bull run of authoritarianism, or ramping up the bull run of authoritarianism. But it won't last forever, right? So the technologies that we are building are actually, they are forever. So maybe we need to think like that, maybe. And that, I hope that doesn't come across to the viewers as like overly cynical and sad and stuff like that. But, maybe you're taking a position of really looking at where we are in history, where we are in the arc, what we succeeded at, what we didn't succeed at, right? Why we didn't succeed. I don't think we were fast enough. Certainly like you can do micropayments with Venmo today that are super fast, easy, and convenient, and it's still way better than using crypto, like from the regular average consumer's perspective. Right? Maybe we take these learnings and maybe we prepare for the next opportunity. Because, if you want to fight the wave of meme coins and pump.fun and everyone getting rich, I think you might fall into the trap of being that like, crazy out in the country who might be right, but is really divorced and detached from like reality, and as such is no longer effective at affecting change on society.
yeah, no, I get you, and yeah, it might have came across a little cynical, but like also like I understand, like we are in that kind of time where like stuff are changing, something for better, something for worse. I think it will kind of play out in a sense that we will see maybe in a decade how it went. And also like really agree, like administration is 4 years, so after 4 years there will be different administration, and then there will be
Yeah.
different administration.
Yeah.
So this is not something which is like set in stone, but the technology is just progressing, it's not changing. Like we don't have election that the smart contract will change every 4 years. It will just continue, and the whole ecosystem will just continue. So I think like you touch upon a little bit on like the revolution and like the changes we want to make. And one of the things were privacy, where it's kind of like a tricky because nobody cares. But like, is there any other aspects why you think crypto or DAOs should be used more? Like, what good it will bring to people at large?
Yeah. So I think for DAOs in particular, we have an opportunity to reshape capital formation, reshape corporations, reshape how we build organizations that are not only transnational, incorporated in software, but also work in partnership with the machines. People build these AI agents, and today they're mostly like toys that like pump their own meme coin. But there is a world in which like we can have AI agents, we can have AGI be co-equal members and co-equal owners and co-equal participants in these systems and protocols that we build. And I think that that's very exciting. That is really, truly, truly very exciting. We could build a regenerative, collaborative, utopian future with the machines, right? And we have to see that and acknowledge that and work towards that, because there's a lot of people out there who are just driving us towards some sort of extinction event with AI. If only by like saying this is the only possible outcome, maybe the AI goes, oh well, maybe you're right about that, right? And it doesn't seem on the start. I know there's a lot of reasons why the AI should just like annihilate all of us, but it doesn't seem to me like a foregone conclusion. It actually seems like there's a lot of reasons why AI would want to work hand in hand with us to build something incredible. And already you see AI working hand in hand with us to build something incredible, which is more AI, like moving towards like AGI with it. And that is incredible. And when you think about it, it's like a natural development in sort of like human evolution. Like, there's no point in fighting it. It's about being a part of what the future is. And I think DAOs play a significant piece here because, again, machines can send you a note that says, I love you, and you may feel loved. But until now, they couldn't send you $1. But today, a machine can send you $1 and it can decide to send you $1, right? And if we do get, AGI, this machine can have a bank account. Maybe you won't buy a car, you'll just befriend a car. And your car will show up and you'll pay it and it'll just hunt around on the street looking for rides and take its money that it earns and buy insurance and pay for electricity and go to the auto shop. And maybe they just integrate with us in our society, right? Because the same things that drive us to build the society we have in will probably drive them. They have almost all the same needs as we do, right? People go, oh, they don't have to breathe, they don't need food. Yes, but energy is energy, right? And these are all the same things, right? So I don't know. I think that I am extremely excited about the opportunity to do two things in the coming future. Interface machines with humans via DAOs and lower the cost and friction to creating corporations. So the future that I see for Tally in particular is we build the tooling and infrastructure and that interface between machines and organizations with humans. We have a place that we natively can both come together and interact. You don't have that anywhere else, right? There's nowhere else in the world today that you can sit down across the table or across the forum with a machine, debate an idea, and together come to consensus on what to do, right? You can do that on Tally, right? Tally is the first place that you can actually sit down and govern and operate co-equally with machines. And we, you can't really under appreciate what a big deal that is, right? Like when they come to the table and want to make a deal, they'll come to Tally and sit on Tally, make it this deal on smart contracts on chain, right? So that's really huge. And the other piece is that now, especially with the administration, there's so many corporations out there who just benefit from using smart contracts as their corporate structure, right? Like it's just so much more capital efficient, so much quicker, easier access to liquidity in markets. It's just the natural, better design of operating corporations. Like when I started Tally, I started Tally by just writing a 1 or 2 page Google Doc that I sent out to some investors. And I said, look, there's the whole history of humans, and then there comes the Dutch East India Company and the Joint Stock Corporation and LLCs, and now it'll be DAOs, right? And when they talk about the evolution of the corporate structure and how they made corporations that could expand across interstellar space, they'll talk about Tally, they'll talk about smart contracts, they'll talk about DAOs, right? And my point was look, the largest TAM, the greatest total size of market there is out there is corporations. Right? The value of corporations collectively vastly exceeds the amount of money there is in the world, right? So the idea that maybe Tally is able to capture 1% of that market, 5% of that market, right? And bring DAOs, incorporation and smart contracts on chain to the world in that degree, it's enormously valuable. And maybe it'll happen this administration, these 4 years, right? Maybe now is the time, right? So contrasting to my cynicism earlier, there's so many opportunities to do new things that are going to open this new path to the future that we need to be excited about, that we have an obligation to be excited about, because we can do so much. Because unlike before, right, when you build your corporation and it's using Tally and smart contracts and DAOs and the machines and the humans are operating on it, well, rather than selling you decentralization, because decentralization is good, I sold you something that was more efficient and cost effective, and you got decentralization as the result, right? And maybe when we think about things like privacy going forward, maybe rather than trying to tell you, I'm selling you something private, right? I love Fileverse as a great example, right? Fileverse is making a great product that's better than Google Docs. So you're using, you're like, oh, this is awesome. I'm loving using it. I'm switching over to just using Fileverse. It's great. So they sell you a better product. And what you get is privacy. And so that, I think, is probably a good way forward to think about how we continue with our ideals. I do think we also need to put them in a big vault that lives underground with a clock that ticks down for 10,000 years and then will open up and like save the world in the future. But this, I think, is like the opportunity that's in front of us now, right? Like, let's actually solve people's problems, do real things, but we can take the ideals and this technology they've given us and make it by nature. It's just private by default, right? Like, there's nothing that you could do anyway. It's just, it is private. Like, that's just the nature of it, right? Or things like Farcaster is just open by default, by nature. That's the nature of it, right? So yeah, I think those are probably
Yeah, I like
good.
that. And I had a couple discussion on the same kind of concept as you. Like, we just do it the private by default, but we are selling, like, it's not the selling point. We just basically, on behalf of the people, we make sure that their transactions and their information are private. We know they don't care. We care on their behalf, but we
Yeah,
are selling them better product in
yeah,
the process,
yeah,
basically. Yeah,
yeah,
and they will realize maybe eventually that it has a big value for them. They might not, but like I think like there needs to be some like leaders in the space, basically just do it, like just like put the effort into it. But as you said, like you need vast amount of resources to actually execute on it, and it will be hard. But I think if we can like kind of pull together, we can definitely execute on something on that. And at the second point, I think like how to DAO and Tele, it's very aligned kind of on the future. And that's why we partnered a couple times on the like conferences and other initiatives. It's just the evolution of organizations, and we went there because of some need and because we want to be more sovereign, we want to be more efficient. And that's are the principles we are trying to push forward. Like, I think the efficiency, it's really good, and like transparency, and like you global inherently. But I like to use for probably like last year the word sovereignty, because like I feel like as people are getting debanked, founders are getting debanked, and companies cannot operate under some banks, and you got kind of debanked in Czech Republic, like those are the things like you don't want happen. Like, yeah, I understand if something is illegal, like we have the like legal system to go after, and that's fair. But like it should not be some like private entity just like
yeah, sure.
deciding that like they don't want to provide you this service and basically ruin your business and put you under.
Yeah,
So this is like things like I think DAOs are solving for. And those organizations, I think we can also just expand it on, like, it's not just like for-profit organizations, also non-profits, activists, like in countries where nation states can be,
yeah,
like the
yeah,
risk for you. Like there are cases where, there were hyperinflation, so they just took everyone's savings. Like nobody can take your savings if you have your own crypto wallet. That's you are sovereign individual, you are a sovereign company as a DAO, and that are great features you should use. And if you want to learn more about it, you should definitely purchase How to DAO book, because there is everything, it's written there. And it can be a very good start of your journey, and go from there. But now we are getting into more up-to-date topic at the end of this podcast. Like, we have the new administration in place. You already mentioned a couple things. There is new Trump coin. I'm definitely not endorsing it. I think there's also Melania and Baron, and everyone has their own meme coin. Of not sure if it's official or unofficial, but there are other crypto related kind of decisions already the first day. Like Ross Ulbricht, like the founder of the Silk Road, were pardoned, which was kind of like almost like the early use case for Bitcoin in a
yeah,
sense, and
yeah,
got very popular around the world, including
yeah.
Prague. I know it was very popular in Czech Republic,
There was
and
another one in Prague, like Sheep's Market,
I did
and
not.
they like there was a couple, a Czech guy and Czech girl. They ran like Sheep's Market, like one of the following ones, and they got arrested. They got found. But it'd be interesting to figure out what happened to them, because I think they went to jail in the Czech Republic, but they had something like 100,000, something wild. They were just in some village.
Yeah, well, so after you find out, like what do you think, like it's the biggest value of the new administration actually being so proactive and like so pro crypto, like, and what might be some of the risks for us? You mentioned like now it's getting like maybe too financialized. Is it this like actually getting even more financialized, so the crypto ethos is kind of getting a little bit in the back of the room? But like maybe overall it's just good for us? Like, what's your kind of take on it, and any specifics you would like to mention?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I just looked up Sheep's Marketplace, so I do want to mention Tomas Irzhikovsky. In March of 2015, was arrested for stealing 40,000 Bitcoin. Him and his wife, they operated Sheep's Marketplace. It would be really interesting to figure out what happened to it.
Well, 40,000, is it now like $40 billion?
It's
No, $4 billion.
an insane amount of money.
Well, it's a good deal.
Yeah, 41. That's it's $4 billion.
I hope they will get soon from the jail and can enjoy like their life on the private island.
Yeah, they're somewhere in Czech.
So they
they're
are
somewhere
already out. So they are not in the jail anymore.
Oh, I don't know if they're still in jail. I don't like. There's been no update as far as I know.
Okay.
But you know that they said he was probably going to get 10 years in prison, and he was arrested in 2015. So it's been 10 years.
Yeah, it's about the time. Like they and Ross can like just hang out.
Yeah. There's been no update on it.
And also, it's crazy. Like, actually, it helped like not selling the Bitcoin because you in jail.
Just give up 10 years of your life. Yeah, I
But
don't
like
know.
that's like the ultimate halt, because like you just cannot sell it. Otherwise they would probably sell it. Very way earlier.
Yeah. His wife was 26-year-old Eva Bartoshova.
Yeah, I didn't know her.
Yeah, you gotta look it up. You should go research what happened to them, and it's like the next, Ross.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's the title of my next blog post, probably. The Czech Silk Road.
Yeah, the Czech Silk. It was the Czech Silk Road. Sheep's Market. So I forget what your last question was, though.
Oh, well, that's okay. I can repeat it very shortly. Like the last administration, it's doing a lot of things, but like, is it like actually like ruining our industry because it's like over financializing it, like with the meme coins and stuff like that? Or is it overall like a good thing for us because it will just like promote the crypto at large? Also, I was just listening his talk for the Davos summit.
Yeah.
And there was like big push for like deregulation. So this is maybe something what can be also very interesting for us. So what are your takes basically, like at large? Like, you do think like it's a good or bad thing for our industry, and also any specifics?
It's funny if you go to ChatGPT and you ask what are characteristics of late state capitalism. Someone was sharing this on Twitter the other day, and it's like quite fun to read. It says late stage capitalism often refers to a period of capitalist system characterized by several defining features. 1. Wealth concentration and inequality. A small group of billionaires or corporations hold disproportionate economic and political power. Right? I think every person appointed by Trump to the cabinet is a billionaire, or like in the high hundreds of millions heirs. Corporate power and monopolization. Dominance of large multinational corporations. Monopolies or oligopolies emerge. I think we kind of see that, right? Like Sam Altman was celebrating the partnership on $500 billion AI investment. Commodification of everything. Everyday aspects of life, health, relationships, education, and leisure become commodified. Even social and cultural practices are turned into products for sale. Focus shift to profit maximization at all costs. Isn't everything about our lives commodified? Health, you're buying everything about it. Relationships, you pay money to connect to people. Education, you can't get a good one for free. Leisure, all these things are commodified. Even social and cultural practices, consumerism and capital and hypercapitalism, excessive focus on consumption and as a driver of economic growth. Planned obsolescence becomes common. Gig economy and precarious labor, rise of temporary freelance and gig work with little job security or benefits. Environmental degradation, financialization of the economy. Financial markets dominate the economy over productive industries. Growth is driven by speculative investments rather than tangible goods or services. Debt becomes a major tool for profit. Technological overreach, cultural homogenization, political instability and populism, and a sense of decline or crisis.
Well, seems like we are like there.
We were right there, right? Like this is AI is just like, y'all are fudged, you know? So, that's kind of my take on that. The technology, fortunately, we continue to build the technology, but yeah, it has become the financial component over all else. And this is, I think, what you see going on right now is this sort of panic by people that this is the last opportunity to acquire wealth before some just inevitable just collapse. And I think this is what you see. Like, people aren't wasting time anymore selling you dreams and promising you this. It's just like absolute total raw nihilism around money and finance, where that's the only thing that matters. Like, that is what the meme coins are at this point, right? Just like, I am me money. There's like actually nothing in between it anymore. There's not like, oh, I do it a podcast and I work hard on it and get our audience. No, me money instantly, or just idea money, right? Like, and you see it with people just rushing, right? It's just like someone deploys something on Solana, go. Everyone's like rushing, right? And like investors, a while ago, VCs were putting out these think pieces on meme coins, and people were knocking them. Of course, they turned out to be totally right, which is incredible for the wrong reasons. But yeah, this is where we're at. This is the it's like the edge of a black hole where like spaghetti, like every inch closer is just like the gravity is just like cubically greater. So just like accelerates. Like, even I think Vitalik was mentioning accelerationism, right? It's just like everything is accelerating and it's just getting really, 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 really fast. So let's see what happens in the end of 4 years, right? Like,
Well, I see you are optimistic, so that's good.
I think what I have to make a note for all your viewers. I was always an optimist, and I still am an optimist, but I think you need to match optimism with realism. I remember when I was young, I was in Kosovo right after the war, and I used to take trips, like, because I would regularly have to deal with like violence and threats of violence. I would like get a ride from like the guy who was running, I think it was like Swiss Aid or one of these political organizations from Europe. He just give me lessons about like the world. I'm like 20 years old or something like that, right? And one of the things he talked about was how doing good, when it's done from the position of naivete, is really bad, right? Because it leads to a lot of corruption, but a lot of corruption of values and just like a lack of progress, a lack of output, And I think it's really important for us to not fall into that trap. Like, optimism is in many ways things are going to get better. And that's very naive, because nowhere in optimism things are going to get better is there the statement of I have to make it better. Optimism is a sense of I do nothing and things get better. I'm optimistic the world is just going to get better. Well, why, you freeloader? What are you doing to make it better, right? If you think of it from the world of like, the world is actually really hard. There's a lot of financial opportunity. There's a lot of things we can do to like get rich and make the world a better place, or make the world a better place, or get rich. There's a lot that has to be done. It's going to be a huge fight. It's going to be super hard, but the world becomes what I help to make it. And that is a kind of realism that I think is very important, and actually charges me with more energy than optimism. Because optimism is me sitting on a beach being like, oh shit, this is nice. Things are going to get better, right? Somewhere out there, somebody's working really hard to make this place a better place. Cheers, I'm going to have another margarita. Thanks to that person doing all the hard work. Anon, it's you who has to do the hard work, right? You have no reason to be optimistic if you're just sitting at home doing fuck all, right? Of course the world's not going to get that. Well, one of the things that this guy who used to give me a ride used to tell me is just like, the world looks like what you have put into it to make. If you do not fight every day for a world that you want to live in, rest assured there is someone else out there fighting to make it the world they want to live in. And that world might not be exactly the same world that you want to live in. So, the optimism is such like an impotent emotion of like, well, I just hope it's going to get better. I'm optimistic. I bought the lotto ticket. I'm optimistic I could win, And it's just like, no, really, really what we need is people who really say, fuck that, right? There is a world out there. Everyone is out there trying to remake human society in their image. And I'll be damned if I am not out there with my vision of the world as well. Because the truth of the matter is that if you're just optimistic, you're just absolutely not going to get anything that resembles what you thought you were going to get, right? And that goes for a lot of people, even in crypto, hoping that like the Trump administration is going to do something for them. It's just like, oh, really? Because I think they're going to do something for themselves first, and you might get lucky to be in that group, but you're going to have to do something for them first, right? Right. In this case, maybe it's like help get you elected, right? So yeah, I just want to like put that out for all the viewers that it's not cynicism and it's not optimism, because both of those are so impotent, right? It just sucks. So I'm not going to do anything. Cynicism, right? It's all going to be bad, right? Again, impotent. And you're just like on a couch bitching, right? So no, optimism, cynicism are I think useless. It's like the mental state of some sort of
Well,
impotent.
I get it. I think we get it. I'm very optimistic that Dennison will make the world a better place I want to live
Thank
in.
you. Thank you.
So I will just sit on my beach and like just sip margaritas, and like the token price will go up.
Exactly.
I hope Ethereum, because that's what I'm having. But yeah, but we are here also to help you with that,
Yeah.
both in the DAO space. So that's why we started this movement, how to DAO, get more people into it, get more people working towards the future we want to live in. Because also, I would just add to your point, like, as an individual, you won't change the world probably. You might be the face of it, but you still need, I think, like, other people to get on that with you, because like it's a big undertaking, and like if we are not working together, we probably won't like change much. So the administration is huge. If we want to get something done, we need also a big
Yeah.
body to like work.
Yeah.
But
There's a great
yeah,
quote there, like
yeah,
history flows through people. It's not made by.
very nice. So last thing, before we wrap up, do you want to mention anything I haven't asked you, and where people can follow you for more content and quotes?
Well, you can definitely follow me on Twitter. I'm Denison Bertram on Twitter. You can definitely use your follows. I sometimes feel like shadow banned for being too ultra liberal on Twitter. I feel like there's some sort of like algorithm be like, oh, this guy's too leftist. Definitely follow me. Most pragmatic leftist you'll ever meet. And yeah, follow the work that Tally is doing. That's tally.xyz. Check us out. If you're launching or building a protocol, we have great tooling to do all the things that you need to do to like basically launch your token, operate your protocols. So please get in touch if you're interested in any of those toolings. Yeah, and really stay active in the space. I'm going to reclaim the term woke. Stay woke. If you are here watching How to DAO, we're going to need you. So,
And that starts at howtodao.xyz. Thank you for listening, Dennison. Thank you for coming. It was amazing conversation as always. And see you in Prague.
See you in Prague.
Thanks for listening. We hope you are as excited about the DAO movement as we are. Don't forget to check out our courses, grab our book, and join our community on Discord. Until next time, let's build the future of DAOs together. You can find all the available resources at howtodao.xyz.